The lobby of the Royal Meridian Hotel gleamed like a monument. Marble floors polished to glass, crystal chandeliers humming above. Guests in tailored suits drifted through, oblivious to the quiet rhythm of the place. A rhythm held together not by managers or architects, but by people like Frank Miles. And on this morning, after 42 years, Frank was working his final shift. He stood in his crisp burgundy uniform, posture proud, shoes shining like they always had, because Frank believed in leaving nothing dull, especially not your exit. His hands, calloused and steady, wheeled a silver cart stacked with Louis Vuitton and scuffed duffels alike. He treated every bag with the same care. He always had. "Morning, Mr. Miles." A guest nodded. Frank smiled. "Morning, sir. Elevator's just ahead on the right." He didn't correct them. They never knew his first name was Franklin, or that he once dreamed of running a hotel, not just standing inside one. But he never let bitterness grow. Only service. Only pride. Down in the break room, the younger bellhops had gathered a cake, store-bought, chocolate, a little lopsided. One of them had drawn a crooked 42 in white icing. Frank chuckled softly. "Y'all didn't have to do that." "Nah, we did," said Terrell, the newest kid. 42 years? I thought I was late when I clocked in 2 minutes over." Laughter filled the room. Someone handed Frank a gift bag with a gold watch inside. "Hotel pitched in," said the assistant manager. "It's engraved, see?" Frank read the tiny letters. "To Frank Miles, a lifetime of service." He smiled, thanked them. But something inside him felt still, not sad, just quiet. He'd given his whole adult life to this place, carried thousands of bags, folded thousands of towels, helped guests to their rooms, and sometimes, quietly, helped staff home when they couldn't take another step. And now, it was over. That evening, he walked the halls one last time, not as staff, just to say goodbye. The hotel hadn't changed much. Same artwork, same ivory wallpaper, same brass luggage carts lined against the wall. But as he passed the service hallway, the one near the laundry chute, something caught his eye. A loose panel. The corner bent. Frank reached out, pried it back, and found something wedged inside. A ledger, old, dusty, bound in cracked black leather. He tucked it under his coat, not thinking why, just feeling that maybe, like him, it had been left behind too long. That night, at home, Frank sat at his kitchen table and opened the book. Inside were rows of names, bellmen, housekeepers, kitchen staff, beside columns of numbers, handwritten annotations, and red ink circles. Names he hadn't seen in decades, numbers that didn't add up. And there, in the margins, a note scribbled in faded pen. Recalculate tips. Adjust payouts below 15%. Keep this off official books. Frank sat back in his chair. He wasn't holding a ledger. He was holding a secret, one that had robbed a generation of their wages, their dignity, maybe even their futures. And suddenly, retirement didn't feel like rest. It felt like a beginning. The pages smelled like dust and cigarette smoke, like secrets that had waited too long. Frank turned them slowly, each one handwritten in firm, tidy script. Rows of names, clock-in hours, and what looked like adjusted tip payouts. Most of the numbers were low, suspiciously low, especially for big weekends when Frank remembered the lobby full of high rollers and celebrities. He paused on one name. James Jimmy Walker, Bellman, 1982 to 1994. Frank remembered Jimmy well. He was loud, kind, the type to sing Al Green under his breath while loading luggage into the elevator. He died broke years ago. Liver failure, Frank had heard. Couldn't afford insurance, could barely afford rent. Frank flipped the page. Lucia Alvarez, housekeeping Antonio Daniels, kitchen Deshaun Clay, bell staff, Names of people who gave their best years to the hotel, only to retire with aching backs and little else. Beside each name, adjusted payout, management cut, 8%, unrecorded tip log, archive not filed. Frank's fingers tightened. This wasn't a mistake. This was a system. The next morning, Frank sat on a bench outside the hotel, watching the valet boys run laps in dress shoes. A man with gray stubble sat beside him. "Frank Miles, I'll be damned," the man said. Frank turned. "Well, I'll be Curtis Holloway, kitchen crew, right?" "Back in the day, yeah. I still got scars from that grease fryer." They laughed, but only for a moment. Frank pulled the ledger from his coat and opened to Curtis's name. Curtis's face dropped. "Where'd you get that?" "Found it tucked behind the wall in the break room." Curtis stared, then nodded slowly. "We always knew something was off. Tips came up light. Overtime vanished. But what could we do back then? Speak up, and they'd find a way to lose your hours. Or your job." Frank flipped to another page. Jimmy was pulling double shifts during convention season. This says he never cleared more than $60 in tips. That's a lie. Curtis sighed. "They did that to all of us." Frank didn't sleep that night. He printed copies of every page. Then he made a list, a long one, of surviving coworkers, families of those who'd passed, and anyone who might have been cheated. He called his niece Vanessa, a local journalist who'd always begged him to tell stories from the old hotel days. "I've got something better than a story," he told her. "I've got proof." Vanessa came by that same evening, eyes wide as she flipped through the evidence. "Uncle Frank, this is huge. You realize this could spark a lawsuit, right?" Frank nodded. "It won't bring Jimmy back or make up for what was taken. But if I walk away knowing this and say nothing, I might as well have helped them do it." Down the hall, the gold retirement watch sat in its velvet box, still ticking. But Frank had a different clock in mind now, and time was up. Frank's old station wagon rolled slow through the south side streets he hadn't visited in years. Once, these blocks had buzzed with laughter and block parties. Now, most porches were sagging, mailboxes rusted, and basketball nets hung like loose threads on bent poles. But behind every door, there was a story, and Frank was ready to listen. The first visit was to Gloria Walker, Jimmy's widow. She lived in a small second-floor apartment over a closed beauty salon. The TV was on low when Frank knocked, but she opened the door almost instantly, like she'd been expecting something. Her eyes widened. "Frank Miles, I haven't seen you since the funeral." "I know," Frank said gently. "I should have come sooner." He stepped inside and sat at the kitchen table, placing a printed page in front of her. It was Jimmy's entry from the ledger. Gloria read it slowly, mouth parting. "Adjusted tips, management deduction. What is this?" "It's proof," Frank said. "They underpaid him, stole from him." For years, Gloria blinked, then tears welled. "He worked himself sick, Frank. Said it'd pay off someday, that if he just kept showing up, something good would come. I buried him with $36 in his pocket." She looked up, hands trembling. "What good is truth now?" Frank didn't speak right away, then softly, "Maybe not for him, but for you, for others. Maybe truth's the only thing left we can still pass down." Over the next week, Frank visited 8 more homes. Antonio Daniels had died without ever owning a car, even though he worked valet for 12 years. Lucia Alvarez's daughter cried as she read her mother's name and remembered nights when Lucia came home with aching feet and missing tips. One man, whose father worked security at the hotel, just shook his head and whispered, "They always said we were paranoid." Every conversation hit Frank like a stone on the chest. These were people who carried the weight, not just of luggage, towels, or room service trays, but the invisible weight of stolen years and silenced labor. Word began to spread. Vanessa, his niece, published a quiet expose in her newspaper. The hidden ledger, how one man found proof of decades of wage theft at a luxury hotel. It didn't go viral, but it reached the right people. A labor attorney called the next morning, then a civil rights foundation, then the local news. The weight Frank had carried alone for a lifetime was starting to be lifted, not erased, but shared. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't just opening a door for someone else. He was opening one for himself. The marble floors of the Royal Meridian hadn't changed, still shining, still pristine, still echoing with the kind of quiet that comes from polished wealth and power. But this time, when Frank Miles walked through the lobby, he wasn't wearing a Bellman's uniform. He wore a gray sport coat, pressed slacks, and a look that said, "I carried this place. Now I carry the truth." At the front desk, the manager blinked in surprise. "Mr. Miles, we weren't expecting you." "No," Frank said, "but I'm here anyway." He walked past him, through the staff hallway, down into the break room, and posted a copy of the ledger summary on the bulletin board, right next to the Employee of the Month plaque. Then he turned and walked right back out. By the next morning, the hotel's legal team had called. A cease and desist letter was sent to Vanessa's paper, claiming misuse of confidential internal materials and defamation without context. That same day, Frank received a call from the hotel's regional VP. "Frank, we're all surprised, shocked even, but surely we can settle this quietly. Is that what you told Jimmy and Lucia and all the others?" The voice on the line paused. "Look, we can offer a goodwill gesture, a retirement bonus, maybe even a small community donation." "This isn't about money," Frank said. "Then what do you want?" Frank's voice didn't shake. "I want every name in that book to be seen. I want every stolen dollar accounted for, and I want the truth on record. No more hiding behind marble." A week later, Channel 9 News ran the story. Hotel ledger reveals decades of wage theft. Bellman turns whistleblower. They interviewed Frank on the hotel steps, wind gently tugging at his coat. "I was proud to work here," he said. "Still am in some ways. But pride doesn't erase theft. Loyalty doesn't mean silence. We carried more than bags in this building. We carried each other. Now it's time the hotel carried its part too." Under pressure from local media, a coalition of former staff, and mounting legal interest, the Royal Meridian issued a public statement. They called it regrettable, historical oversight, and incomplete records from previous management. But behind the curtain, they were scrambling. The civil rights firm assisting Frank filed a formal class action suit. Dozens of former employees, or their surviving family members, joined. The case was given a name: Miles versus Royal Meridian et al. Frank returned home that night to a letter on his porch. No name, no return address. Inside was a folded sheet of paper with just 4 words: "Stop before you ruin it." He stared at it for a moment, then lit a match, watched it curl into ash. He'd been silent for 42 years. Now his voice had rooms to echo through. 2 years later, the Royal Meridian lobby looked nearly the same. Same chandeliers, same golden elevators, same doormen in matching coats. But now, the silence carried something else. Memory, accountability, a weight once hidden, now etched in brass. After a year of litigation, the Royal Meridian Hotel settled the class action suit. They paid $7.6 million into a fund for back wages and reparations, distributed to surviving workers and families of the ones who never made it to retirement. Dozens who had lived in silence finally received something like acknowledgement, but Frank Miles never took a cent. When the hotel sent him a check, he returned it with a handwritten note: "I didn't do this to be paid." I did this because silence doesn't age well. At the center of the lobby now stood a new fixture, a waist-high bronze pedestal, polished smooth, and on it, a thick metal plaque with names: Bellman, housekeepers, porters, cooks, going back over 50 years. Above the names, it read, "To those who carried the weight. May your labor never be forgotten again." On the day of the dedication, Frank stood quietly near the back. No fanfare, no speech, just watching. Young staff members came up to shake his hand. "You made this happen. They see us now, Mr. Miles." One woman, a current housekeeper, clutched her badge like it meant something again. Vanessa, now a columnist, joined him on the steps. "You sure you don't want to give a few words?" Frank shook his head, smiling. "I already said what I needed. What's next for you?" He looked up at the building, not with bitterness, but with peace. "I spent my life holding the door open for others. Now I know. I opened one that stays open. That's enough." As he turned to leave, the sunlight hit the plaque just right, and for a brief second, every name shimmered, not just remembered, but restored, because justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it wears a name tag. He carried bags, he carried trays, but most of all, he carried silence. Until one day, Franklin Miles decided that silence had lived long enough. This wasn't just about back pay. It was about dignity, about memory, about the weight of a name that was never meant to be forgotten. If this story moved you, help carry it further. Like, share, and subscribe to make sure these voices keep echoing long after the last shift ends.